Perfection doesn't exist in most things, if anything at all, and certainly not in anime. I think that as soon as we charge something with perfection, we're admitting to an end to art itself. As Sylvia Plath put it, perfection is terrible, it cannot have children. That very highest peak called the perfect anime is as illusory as total consensus. I'm not going to pretend that the subject of today's review is perfect. I'm also not going to pretend that there are flaws where I can't see them, just for the sake of avoiding gushing. Couching my words to create a fair and balanced position, wherein I seem more sophisticated for seeing the flaws in it, is pointless. If you want a bold, challenging take on the material that questions the validity of its popularity, find it elsewhere. I'm going to lay out my own feelings, as imperfect as they are, and if you object, you object. Hopefully it'll still be interesting. It's an uphill battle. It's not an uphill battle because I love this anime so much that reason fails me, because my love for it isn't rooted in either nostalgia nor sentiment, though it can provoke either. It's not even an uphill battle because it's been talked about to death, though that does present an issue. It's an uphill battle because I cannot possibly do this show the justice it deserves. You want pithy analysis and erudite insight? Even 20 years later, the internet is still flooded with analysis. Some of it is even worth reading or listening to. My goal is to remain above all true to my own impressions. Any coinciding conclusions are unintended. With that said, Cowboy Bebop, folks. It's still my favorite. Favorite is a tricky thing too, now that I think about it. It used to be your favorite was just the thing of its kind that you liked more than all the others. But it became a hierarchy of several picks at some point, and now we're figuring out what our 12th favorite new wave single from the years 1981 to 1988 is. What exactly is a 12th favorite of anything? At what point does a thing cease being favorite and just becomes thing I like? I get caught up in it too. I do top 10 lists, top 20 lists. I do them all the time. Hey, what's your 7th favorite Yoshiyuki Tomino work? What's your 14th favorite episode of The Simpsons? Who are your top 30 Batman writers? Who's tied for 4th place? How much time do you have to kill? Favorite is favorite. It means the one thing. The one thing you think of as the best in that field. It doesn't matter what your second favorite thing is. Second favorite isn't favorite. Second favorite is meaningless. Either something is your favorite or it's not. But we keep ourselves busy making these lists and playing favorites. That said, Cowboy Bebop is unequivocally my favorite Japanese animation work. An anime that debuted in 1998, created by Sunrise. Its broadcast history is interesting for its chopped-up original run and eventual complete run on a satellite network, due to violent content. It was helmed by Shinichiro Watanabe, who directed with Soji Kawamori for Macross Plus, and was largely written by Keiku Nobumoto, who wrote Macross Plus, and would go on to Wolf's Rain, Samurai Champloo, and others. It's often said that its success in Japan was modest at best, but it actually received broad acclaim in Japan at the time, and sold well in physical media, even if it isn't as ingrained into the culture as it is into Western anime fandom. It won the Japanese Science Fiction Award, the Seiyun Award. It was certainly popular enough to earn itself a film while it was just beginning to hit big in the US with the Adult Swim run. To credit its popularity solely to Western reception is pure fantasy. But I don't want to talk about how popular Cowboy Bebop is. I want to talk about why I love it so much. It wouldn't matter much if it was half as popular as it is, as far as my own thoughts and feelings for it. Yes, of course, while it was available in the US before its Adult Swim run, that block largely introduced me to it. I had previously only seen a single episode of it, Honky Tonk Women, and specifically only the scene where Jet was making the deal for an exchange with a gangster-slash-casino boss. It caught my attention for a little bit, but was drowned out with my then interest in, let's say, lesser works. But Adult Swim shot it full blast right into my face at just the right moment, and it burrowed itself deep into my consciousness. A small crew of bounty hunters. an ex-syndicate combat expert, an ex-cop with paternal instincts, an ex-popsicle bad luck magnet, a bizarre child genius, and, their dog, fly back and forth the solar system, running towards some things and away from most. This motley crew of outcasts, rejects, losers, and ne'er-do-wells pursue criminals to earn a paycheck, but are always barely scraping by because something usually goes south. Somehow they manage to shrug off their failures and keep at it, somewhere between if at first and insanity is repeating the same thing. They live day to day, bounty to bounty, each episode placing another piece in the larger puzzle picture, giving context to the previous ones, even though it runs mostly episodic. So, you have science fiction elements, a lot of martial arts and gunplay, some noir-style dramatics, and not a little silly absurdity, too. Is it straightforward action schlock? Is it heartbreaking tragedy? A ridiculous hodgepodge of movie pastiches? A treatise on the longing of broken people? The answer is yes. It's always yes. It's Cowboy Bebop. The answer is yes. But that's reductive. Cowboy Bebop is the so-called starter anime that gets better and more complex the more you watch it. And I've watched it, over 20 times. Probably over 30. I'm not exaggerating. The show consists of 26 episodes, most of them not directly related but share common themes and motifs. The remarkable thing about the show is how each new episode reveals a little more about the world of the show and helps you understand some of the context for the previous ones. They're each like little short films in themselves, often paying homage to cinema, but carving their own indelible mark into each new experience. And this goes to inform the underlying storyline running throughout about Spike's past and the Syndicate. Spike Spiegel, our main protagonist of the series, was modeled to look like actor Yusako Matsuda, specifically how he appears in his role in the TV series Tante Monogatari, or Detective Story. He also seems to share some basic anatomical similarities to Lupin III, with the lanky build, long legs, and same basic shoes. He also shares similar personalities at times. Spike was once a member of the Red Dragon Syndicate, where he fought alongside Vicious, who became his nemesis. His life as a bounty hunter is marked by his simultaneous easygoing, go-with-the-flow nature and a rare impulsive recklessness that makes his job a danger to himself and others. He practices Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do martial art and carries with him a Jericho 941.
Now, we'd like you to drop the gun slowly. What's wrong? If you don't comply...
Spike. It's not entirely clear if he has a death wish, or is just resigned to whenever death seems to come at him. Maybe not to surrender, but to just put all his chips on one spin of the wheel. His philosophy is, whatever happens, happens, and his tendency to put himself in no-win scenarios has his partners frustrated, and while they don't like admitting it, perhaps a bit worried too. He's a man who maintains that there's a missing part of him, that he's the walking dead, like a ghost just going through the motions, until he can regain that thing, that person. In other words, Julia, his beloved. Scarcely has such a tragic character kicked so much ass, and yet still remains sympathetic.
Nice ship.
Yeah, it's a blast from the past. I've had it for 10 years.
It looks like it's been around.
Guess you could say we've done some traveling. I'm actually a traveling performer.
I can tell when you're joking and when you're not.
Yeah, I hear that a lot.
Jet Black, the actual owner of the ship Bebop the crew operates out of, is only 36 years old but looks a bit older. He worked for the Inter-Solar System Police, ISSP, out of Ganymede, but lost his arm and called it quits. He was already on his way out anyway, since his old lady ran off, leaving him a Dear John letter and a watch. He's strapped with a Walter P99, but has plenty of brute strength for hand-to-hand combat, even if he isn't as skilled as Spike. He's the father figure of the crew, trying to keep them in line, imparting wisdom and his personal philosophy and squabbling with them, but always letting them back home. Jet's a guy who's looking for relief from his past. He still has his pride as the officer he once was, but he acknowledges the environment became untenable because of corruption. You can tell he's trying hard to let go of the past, and he does it more successfully than Spike, perhaps because of the years he has on him. He gives his team a fairly wide berth, but like any parent is upset when they don't check in. Don't let his generosity fool you, though. He's not to be taken lightly.
I didn't want to come here, but something else insisted.
What?
The arm I lost because of you.
Faye Valentine is trouble. It can be said that she's had a run of bad luck that predates the show's story by over 50 years and never got much better. Cryogenically frozen after a spacecraft accident, revived decades later as part of a scam by confidence tricksters, constantly ducking people she owes, and a shameless gambler who trusts nobody, she hasn't been having a good century. A consummate trickster in her own right, she has a difficult time expressing her real feelings owing to her past. It seems like at least part of her outward personality is a facade to keep her from getting too close to anyone. After all, as she said, nothing good ever came when she trusted others. And when she does start getting attached, she's liable to take off before she gets hurt.
I tell you, instead of feeling alone in a group, it's better to have real solitude all by yourself. When I'm dealing with them, I swear it's nothing but trouble. And I get nothing out of it. So it doesn't matter if I'm there or not, right?
You were just afraid they'd abandon you. So you abandoned them. You distanced yourself from the whole thing.
The woman's no wilting flower, though, and while hurt inside, is still a tough lady who can weather a fight pretty well. She's very strong-willed in some ways, even if her willpower doesn't extend to preventing her several vices. When push comes to shove, her determination is her greatest weapon, and a longing to belong is her greatest desire.
It's the best. Belonging is the very best thing there is.
The girl with the almost otherworldly presence, Edward Wong Helpepelu Tavruski IV, Radical Edward, or just Ed, is a brilliant hacker of the crew. She lives a rather minimalist existence, only seeming to own a computer, and isn't attached to anything else. She spent years roaming the surface of the broken earth, building a reputation with her antics, so she's a girl who doesn't hide from the sun, even if she rarely leaves the Bebop. Aside from her hacking, she's an almost Diogenes-like vagrant. In a rich man's house, there's no place to spit but in his face, so it's a good thing she's shacking up with losers.
So what could it be then?
Well, it's
A mystery space creature! Spooky! The attack of the horrible alien!
Well, yeah, that is possible, I suppose. Oh, yeah, right.
Then what is it? It's not in the database, right?
Well,
Look, these pairs are abnormal.
you think so?
Ed has never seen this before. So what else could it be but a horrible alien, huh? What?
Now that I think about it, is it just that Ed is particularly tan from the time she spent in the baking heat? Or is it an ethnic shade? She's kind of dark-ish.
Well, what's the word for it, Lana? You freaked out when I said quadroon.
Imagine that!
You imagine it!
Both of you imagine shutting up!
Ed's closest companion is the ship's dog, Ein, a Welsh corgi artificially created in a lab as some kind of living computer peripheral meant to interface with some kind of database. This has gone completely unnoticed by the Bebop crew, who seem to only notice he's a clever pet with good instincts. It's not until toward the end of the run that we see what he's capable of, aside from keeping Ed and Jet company while Spike and Faye are out wreaking havoc. He's a good boy.
Food. Hey, wait a minute, Ein. We have to share and share alike. Huh? Ein? Bad mushroom?
Speaking of peripherals, there's the two vital figures from Spike's past that play important roles in his emerging story arc, Julia and Vicious. We actually aren't given a lot of details about them. We only hear about Julia in episodes with Vicious, and when Vicious is around, he doesn't speak very often. Apparently, at some point, Julia, who was sleeping with Vicious, started a relationship with Spike behind his back. When Spike wanted to flee the syndicate with Julia, Vicious wasn't having it. Julia ran off on her own, separately, and Spike faked his own death and started a new career. Vicious is... well, his name's appropriate. He's a cold, cruel bastard who framed his own army buddy for espionage for what seems to be just for yucks. Not that Vicious does a lot of laughing, mind you. Actually, the whole idea of Vicious's past is never really paid close attention to. When Vicious went to the war on Titan, was he already with the Syndicate and chose to go to sell intelligence to the enemy, or was he drafted? I can't imagine he joined for patriotism. Maybe Spike and Julia's affair blossomed when he went off to Titan. I can understand Vicious's special brand of enmity towards them in that case.
There are consequences to breaking the heart of a murdering bastard.
Point is, there was plenty of room to grow the background of these characters as time went on, but honestly, the economy of storytelling suited them. Because the point of Vicious and Julia isn't about how we feel about them directly, but how we feel about them through the lens of Spike. Julia is Spike's basic platonic ideal of a romantic outlet. She brought out parts of him he never knew he had and desperately could no longer live without. And Vicious is the embodiment of Spike's shady past biting him back, the consequence of him having lived a life full of violence. It also helps Vicious as a villain that he's got some damn good presence. You'll remember this guy. Dude brings a sword to a gunfight and rarely regrets it.
You should see yourself. You have any idea what you look like right at this moment, Spike?
What?
A ravenous beast. The same blood runs through both of us. The blood of a beast who wanders, hunting for the blood of others.
I've bled all that kind of blood away.
Then why are you still alive?
It's pretty clear that Bebop owes more than a little to Lupin III, even aside from the superficial elements of a team with a sly, lanky guy, a dude with a beard, a buxom troublemaker, and a member who's proficient at hacking. They're all basically experts. Strong, fast, smart, and cool, yet more often than not, they ultimately fail in their episodic missions. It has that same conceit of Lupin that the best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. On paper, there's little reason why this team shouldn't succeed more often than not, but it goes to show that there are just circumstances out of our control, no matter how good we are at what we do. It's almost comforting as a viewer, knowing that even the people at the top of their game still stumble. Though it can also be frustrating when the efforts of characters you enjoy are all for naught. Well, they succeed now and then, at least. But that, as Stokes from Overthinking It asserts, is what works so well in this show, the subversion of expectations. With Spike as this martial arts badass, you'd think the show would have a lot more hand-to-hand combat, more intricate, bone-crushing action. But it rarely occurs. It dazzles us in the first episode, but is cut away from in the second. You'd think there'd be all kinds of super violent gun battles. There are, but again, not often. The show gives you what you need, not what you expect, and still manages to give you something worth watching while doing it. The showdown with Tong Poo at the amusement park, it's not some huge bloodbath with climactic final blows. Spike confronting Londes in his lair, it has nothing to do with his defeat at all. And Apple Deli the mapmaker, he's too much for Spike to handle. These aren't anything like what I thought they'd be, and yet they all fit so well. Spike doesn't get to have a solo throwdown with Vicious on Callisto. Jet's arm wasn't taken by who he thought, and Faye's search for her past meets an unexpected, yet not entirely out of left field conclusion. Yet, what happens in all three cases works. Film and television genres are celebrated through the little films that are the episodes of Bebop, including Hong Kong heroic bloodshed, sci-fi horror, detective noir, blaxploitation, and westerns. The show references Star Trek, Batman, and even Chips. It's a blending together of visual touchstones and thematic styles that support the boast made in the opening credits and occasionally the eye catches that the show is a genre itself. Personally, I think of the show as anime as directed by Quentin Tarantino. I mean, we even have the foot fetishism. But it isn't just a string of movie and TV references played to simply reference them, but to evoke their emotional resonance through the characters and situations of this series. So, maybe in a way, that boast is accurate. It can certainly be said of the musical style of the show. The soundtrack is largely provided by the brilliant Yoko Kanno, a peerless talent in the industry who is a true chameleon of sound. In the series, you'll hear kinds of music such as big band jazz, jazz standard, Latin jazz, blues, bluegrass, bossa nova, country, swing, opera, heavy metal, world fusion, ambient, and even a little electronica. Where are you going to hear such a variety of music, and at the high quality provided by this show? And when she's not employing vocalists like Steve Conte, Emily Binninger, Scott Matthew, and Mai Yamane, she's using her own made-up language in pieces like Greenbird. How talented is that? And Cowboy Bebop's soundtrack is just one of several of Kanno's great works. She is a virtuoso par excellence. There's a fair number of themes and motifs in Cowboy Bebop. One that permeates a few of director Shinichiro Watanabe's works is hunger. The Bebop crew is always barely scraping by, often finding it hard to scrounge for simple sustenance. These are not people who eat out of boredom or for status, maybe not even for enjoyment, but simply survival. They putter around in a worn-out converted fishing trawler, so they're not really living high off the hog. And any little taste of the sweet life is drowned with the bitter realities of their actual lives. You sort of get the impression that while they are free in the sense that they don't belong to any particular organization or cause, their independence means failure is an empty stomach. But there's more than just a physical hunger dogging our protagonists, but, as earlier mentioned, a sense of a missing piece of them. At least in the three grown-up members of the crew, there exists a longing to retrieve something that was lost to them. And yet, for so many characters chasing that thing, chasing that missing piece, trying to fill the void by desperately looking backwards is their downfall. Incomplete people looking to fill that missing piece with a nostalgia for some long-past golden age, sacrificing more to get that back than they ever lost, and sometimes losing everything.
About Mao. He had a lot of guys out looking for you. He was convinced you were still alive, said he could feel it. No one could talk him out of it. So now, here you are, finally back. And Mao is...
Annie, I think you've had enough.
Not yet. This one's for Mao.
If it's for Mao, then I'll drink it myself.
Gren, Fad, Londas, Apple Deli. The good and terrible alike discover that they just cannot let things go. They trip themselves up trying to change things that might be best left alone, accomplish things that are completely futile efforts. Gren knows Vicious is just going to kill him. Fad is just looking for peace of mind by atoning with his life. Londas is lashing out against those lucky enough to have normal bodies. Apple Deli's mapping efforts are entirely pointless, regardless of his good intentions. You just want to say to these people, let it go, let it be. You can understand the drive. but you can lose so much more than you started with by chasing that dream. Isn't that the chance you take by pursuing big goals? Though at some point, isn't it just throwing away your potential? It seems like the series is all about things are bad and are going to get worse. Very few, if any, characters get a happy ending, or even a safe one. But it's not just tragedy porn because it transforms that sadness into a better understanding of the setting of the show and a deeper appreciation for the efforts of our protagonists. Even if they can seem, in the short term at least, rather useless.
That's just how you were back then. You decided everything. In the end, you were always right. When I was there with you, I never had to do anything for myself. All I had to do was to hang on to your arm like a child without a care in the world. I wanted to live my own life, make my own decisions, even if they were terrible mistakes.
This is the heart of why this series has endured for 20 years. Yes, the action is great, the music is sublime, and the characters are colorful. It has everything any successful anime needs. That's not what pushes it to the peak, though. This worn-out, dingy, often depressing, always dangerous, and frankly maddening world, this wonderful and terrifying world of Cowboy Bebop, is revealed to us piece by piece through the broken psyches and existential tension in its narratives and themes.
Wait, does this have to do with Mao?
Yeah, I have a debt to pay off.
You wanted to know what happened to my arm.
Huh?
This is what I paid, yeah, for being too gung-ho and running ahead of the game. You get the point?
I don't want to do this, Jet.
Then why are you?
Let's just say my past is catching up to me.
But perhaps in some ways it's a victim of its own greatness. I promise I'm not taking a victory lap here, but it feels to me like the show is so incontrovertibly excellent, it still ruins me for many a title. Sure, I went on to loving many other anime in the time since it debuted on Adult Swim, though you probably won't see me doing a Legend of the Galactic Heroes review. It was Full Metal Alchemist in 2003 that broke me out of my post-Bebop funk. That was the first anime I reviewed on Otaku Evolution. It restored my faith that there was still greatness to come. Maybe anime wouldn't ever quite reach the peak of Bebop, but then maybe it would someday. Perhaps it's not even important. Our hierarchy of favorites is probably nonsense anyway. By definition, anything that isn't your top favorite isn't going to be as good. But does that stop you from pursuing other things you might like? Nope. There's a lot of great chemistry between our main characters. They're quick to a snarky quip or dismissive scoff, but you can tell they feel a lot for each other, even if it's hard for them to admit it. They're personalities that work off each other in slightly different ways, from the guarded but kindred bonding of Spike and Jet, to Spike and Faye's almost flirtatious hostility, to Jet's reluctant father-like scolding of Faye's troublesome nature, to Jet's nurturing of Ayn, to Ed and Ayn's symbiotic relationship, to Faye and Ed's, whatever this is between Faye and Ed. Kind of an older sister, younger sister thing for Faye, and for Ed, well, who knows how Ed actually thinks.
There it is. This is a memory cartridge for playing e-chess. The memory chip stores data within the piece. Yeah, you can activate one game. It connects to the net. See?
And so this has something to do with the incidents at the gate?
Not a bit.
Maybe this whole thing with the Astral Gate is really just a big game. Go ahead and play against your cyber opponent, Ed.
Right.
I'll try dealing with the Gate Corporation again.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's gonna score more. Play ball.
Yet these characters are so reluctant to actively bond as a collective unit. They're co-workers that refuse to realize that in some ways they're family. I don't even think Faye's sadness at Spike's obsession with his past in the end is a feeling of losing a potential love interest, but instead not wanting the family to disintegrate. It's not a sexual longing, it's more a wanting of a place to go back to. Ultimately, these are people who don't communicate entirely honestly. They're more fond of each other than they want to admit, and I think that's part of the tragedy. Let's see, what else do I have to talk about? Well, let's just mess around and ask some semi-rhetorical questions. Keep in mind, this is just for fun. None of these are particularly important, just food for thought. What was that war on Titan about? I mean, Titan seems like a completely barren wasteland. Is there any kind of resource there worth fighting for? Who are the two sides in it, the Martian military and some rebels? Or two different factions of the same power? Why did Vicious go, but not Spike? I like to think that Vicious signed up just so he could legally kill people. Get some practice in, learn some new ways of offing folk during his slump in missions. You don't want to get rusty. Do the ISSP have force field technology? I mean, certainly there's some kind of force field technology going on with the crater cities on Mars, right? They gave Tongpu a force field when they experimented on him, and somehow the flight ability. Why not use it to keep bullets out of officers' bodies and such? Apparently the force field has lower limits, though, given a knife can penetrate it when a bullet can't. Makes sense. You want to be able to put a sandwich in your mouth now and then without hitting the barrier. I'm also struggling to understand the Red Dragon Syndicate. What's with those three little guys, the van? Are they some kind of psychics or something? Mystics? Why don't they delegate more? Don't even let Vicious near you. Get some middle management type to absorb the blows. Maybe that's what Mao was. Was Vicious even authorized to kill Mao, or did he just do it and plead, whoops, to the van? How stupid do they have to be to not just immediately kill Vicious after he tried to kill them? Guys, I get it. Humiliation, whatever. But we're talking about Vicious here. What's the deal with the Red Dragon HQ? They have their syndicate's logo right out in the front of the building, and hitmen in suits are just kind of standing around in the lobby? Is this their everyday business environment? Do they just wait around for guys to burst in and shoot at them? Why would they advertise that the building is where a criminal syndicate operates out of? Is there a legitimate face? Also, if your criminal organization's only qualification for becoming the leader is killing the previous leader, maybe you should reconsider your organizational skills. Obviously, Vicious had a death wish, as he set up explosives in his throne room to go off when somebody enters. I think that's what that was. Which only ends up hurting him too. Maybe I'm expecting too much from a guy named Vicious. Cool bird, though. Cowboy Bebop is undoubtedly my favorite anime. It's that one anime I can constantly go back to, and I have, and always be impressed by. That said, it may not be yours. I'm not trying to convince you to make Cowboy Bebop your favorite, or even one of your favorites, though it ought to be. This video was just a labor of love for a work that largely defies genre while also embracing it. Maybe I haven't said anything that anyone else hasn't. This isn't about that. This is just about my appreciation. The question is, where do I go from here now that I've reviewed my absolute favorite? Well, Otaku Evolution isn't about reviewing my favorites. If it were, I might already be done. I haven't run out of anime yet, though. This is Mike, Penguin Truth, for Otaku Evolution. There's more to come in the future. Until then, see ya!
Never seen a blue sky. Yeah, I can feel it reaching out and moving closer. There's something about blue. Ask myself what it's all for.
You have no choice. We have to use the dog whistle.
You know what that could mean? It's very risky.
I don't care.
It'll draw attention.
It's our only option.
We're ready to go.
Then do it. Is it on? I can't hear it.
It's too high-pitched. Only animals can pick it up.
I knew that. I was testing you.